Tonight on Capitol Journal, budget hearings at the State House reveal how inflation is impacting state agencies. We'll take you inside. The World Games are underway in Birmingham. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott was at the opening ceremonies. State Senator Bobby Singleton is in studio discussing legislative issues. Alabama Republican Party Chairman John Wahl talks about the dramatic last few weeks of election controversies. And Tiffany Davis, the PBS Newshour Gwen Ifill Fellow, joins us to discuss her program and ask a few questions of her own. It's all next on Capitol Journal. From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. The legislature had another round of budget hearings this week in which lawmakers heard from state agencies about how inflation and gas prices are affecting their finances. The hearings are informal, but legislative leaders thought it was important to have the discussions publicly. Capitol Journal's Karen Goldsmith has the story.
Even though the 2023 legislative session is more than 6 months away, lawmakers who craft the general fund budget are hearing from state agencies now because the current rate of inflation and a possible recession will impact their budget-making decisions. Alabama's unified judicial system, also known as the courts, and the Department of Mental Health shared with the committee how inflation is impacting their agencies. The court says the cost of toner has doubled and the mileage rate has increased by 6.7%.
Now, we do have 30 circuit judges who travel in multiple county circuits, and we reimburse them when they travel from one courthouse to the other courthouse.
Mental Health says inflation is further straining their underpaid workforce, and the department is seeing increased costs.
We always see an incremental rise in the cost of drugs and pharmacy. That is something we try to build into our budget every year. But obviously we're seeing a much larger increase than we originally anticipated.
And both agencies are, for now, benefiting from certain set costs.
You're seeing that paper and envelopes are locked in by the state contract until the end of December. And our hardware expenses are on a state contract until March.
We do have contracts that are set for at least 5 years. For example, our food service and our housekeeping contracts.
But
we know that once those dates end for those contracts, we're going to experience increased cost.
But what we saw during the pandemic is for example, with our housekeeping contract, when they could not provide the staffing, they basically gave us a 30-day notice and terminated the contract. And so we're very concerned that that's what's going to happen with many of our existing contracts when the food prices go up and they can't deliver what they originally said they could deliver for the price that we negotiated. We anticipate that we'll see some contracts terminated and then we'll have to rebid the contracts, and obviously the price will be greater.
However, both say using technology such as Zoom has helped them save money. For Capitol Journal, I'm Karen Goldsmith.
Mental Health Commissioner Kim Boswell also shared how the pandemic and economic conditions are impacting Alabamians' mental health. She said her department is collaborating with other agencies to offer help and support.
We also did a really fun project with Commissioner Pate. We provided mental health training through the Alabama Department of Agriculture and Industries in all 67 counties in the state. We basically did mental health first aid in all 67 counties. What we know about our rural communities is 66% of the farmers say that their mental health issues have increased since COVID. And so because he was very aware of that, there was a grant that came out, picked up the phone and called us, and we got mental health first aid training in all 67 counties. We have multiple projects that we're working with DHR on right now, but one of the most exciting is training with the DHR supervisors. Really, there are multiple opportunities there for us to cross-train our staff. As I've said to some of my fellow cabinet members, the level of collaboration among cabinet members is very high. We really all believe that that's one of the ways we're going to get through any kind of economic downturn, is by figuring out how can we work together and really focus resources on those people who are in the greatest need.
Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker made a blunt funding request of lawmakers. He wants the court system to be included in the next round of American Rescue Plan Act funding. Specifically, he is asking for money for technology enhancements, lost wages and revenue, support for probate courts, and flexibility to hire retired judges.
They'll be able to retain their retirement pay, come in, be paid 1/4 of the current rate for that judgeship, and be able to fill in. This is something that's being used right now in seven other states with ARPA. So this is a way to provide a bridge until when the legislature thinks that they have the money to offer us the funding for all of those permanent judgeship needs that we have right now. And this would be by contract, year to year, so we wouldn't be stuck with personnel costs on this. This would be a bridge to help us get to the point of funding for permanent judgeship needs.
Kirk Fulford of the Legislative Services Agency shared some good news. The state's general fund and education trust fund budgets are still quite healthy and look to finish the current fiscal year with positive balances.
Year-to-date receipts, and these are a reflection of as of June 30th. We're up by $162 million in the general fund. That's 9% growth. There are little timing issues in there, but not very many. That's kind of real growth, but it's something that we need to keep in mind. Look at the growth in lodgings taxes is 33% year over year. That's a continuation of people having a lot of money to spend and the need to spend it. Year to date, $1.4 billion in growth on the education trust fund. Again, I'll say it again, income and sales. You want to know the answer, what's driving education trust fund receipts? It's income and sales. Income is up. Net income tax receipts are up $1.3 billion. Sales tax receipts are up $90 million. So out of the $1.45 billion in growth to date, most all of it is income and sales.
The World Games opened this week in Birmingham. The international event features more than 3,600 athletes participating in non-Olympic events, including sumo wrestling, pickleball, martial arts, tug of war, and other sports. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott was on hand for the opening ceremonies at Birmingham's Protective Stadium.
There's a buzz going through Birmingham as the city gets ready for the World Games.
It's huge, not just because of the sports and the magnitude of the athletes that we'll have here, but it puts Birmingham, it puts the state of Alabama in a different light.
People by the thousands are streaming to downtown Birmingham because the World Games are about to get started, bringing the finest athletes in the world right here to show off their athletic abilities and to also showcase and highlight the city of Birmingham and the state of Alabama for the world to see.
Jay Robertson is the vice president for the World Games 2022 and says a lot of effort has happened to get here.
There are a lot of people behind the scenes that made this possible, that put forth the effort, from our Convention Visitors Bureau to state tourism to the governor's office to the mayor's office of Mayor William Bell at the time, which is now Mayor Woodfin. A lot of people working to come together and make this a reality.
It's a big task Birmingham is ready for.
With over 3,600 athletes from all over the world, with over 1,000 media, 1,500 media from all over the world in the United States, to be able to broadcast worldwide on the Olympic Channel, domestically on CBS for the world, the United States, and citizens all over to see these games.
People coming to the World Games will see familiar sports plus new categories.
Dance sport to softball to sumo wrestling. I mean, all that's in the next 72 hours is 96 hours is going to be a lot of different sports going on at the same time.
For Capitol Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
Alabama civil rights icon Fred Gray was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom this week at the White House. President Joe Biden presented Gray with the nation's highest civilian honor for his lifetime of service to advance equality and justice under the law.
When Dr. King, Rosa Parks, and Claudette Colvin, and John Lewis, and other giants of our history needed a lawyer for their fight for freedom, you know who they call? They call a guy named Fred Gray. That's who they call. One of the most important civil rights lawyers in our history. Fred's legal brilliance and strategy desegregated schools and secured the right to vote. He went on to be elected as one of the first African Americans to Alabama state legislature since Reconstruction. An ordained minister, he imbued a righteous calling that touched the soul of our nation. And at 91 years young, he's still practicing law. He's still...
We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Next, I'm joined by State Senator Bobby Singleton, the minority leader for the State Senate of Alabama. Senator, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Well, thank you for having me, Todd.
Now, y'all are in town this week to deal with budget hearings. These are kind of rare in terms of, out of season budget hearings, but because of the extraordinary situation we're in with inflation and everything, y'all have asked agencies to come in and kind of give some updates on things. How are these budget hearings going?
Well, we call them informal budget hearings, and I think it's an opportunity for us to get a projection of where we are. Chairman Albritton and Chairman Klaus during these sessions has done a great job at getting questions over to agencies to come in and give us an update of where they are. And I think that right now we're looking good based on the projections to where we are in spite of the inflation.
Do you think this inflation, if it lasts, 1 year, 2 years, down the road, that agencies could be looking at any kind of cuts?
Well, based on the projections that we're getting now, and we have done some great jobs in terms of being able to make sure that we've done very much conservative spending in the state. We've been able to pay back rainy day funds. We've been able to set up funds that allow us to be able to, like rolling reserves and other things that allow us to deal with those projections just in case that we were looking at downfalls. And so with that, we're in pretty good shape. And I think that based on the projections that we heard today, that we could probably go maybe a year or so with where we are now before we start start getting in trouble with our budgets.
Well, I remember hearing that back during the legislative session because record budgets, right? Record revenues.
Yes.
And yet you heard folks saying on the floor, well, be careful. We're not going to spend it all. We're going to put some away because it's not always going to be this flush.
Yes. And I think that that's where we are. We work in a bipartisan manner to make sure that I think the state of the state is healthy, with leadership from the governor and the leadership from budget chairmen. We've done a great job, I think, at making sure that we watched our spending and just because the growth is there and not just spending all the money at one time and saving back for that rainy day. And so we're now, the rain has started to drizzle. We don't have a downfall right now, but we're starting to drizzle. And we're seeing gas prices go up, the price of food, shelter, the rent is starting to go up for people, but yet and still, we're looking at our wages have gone up in terms of people being able to work. The unemployment rate is still up high in the state of Alabama. So right now we're not feeling the rainfall. It's just a drizzle right now.
Y'all heard from Mental Health Commissioner Kim Boswell this week. Mental health is an area really that has had a lot more funding, a lot more focus here in the last couple of years than maybe it has the last 10 or 12. Has that been intentional on the legislature's part to really focus on mental health?
Yes, it has. We looked at mental health and, right after the federal government looked at us in terms of our prison, look at the mental health aspect of where we were in our prison system, we start not only just looking at our inmate population, but we start looking at our general population. That's why we set up the crisis centers across the state. We set up pilot programs in rural areas in our budget to make sure not only the urban areas get an opportunity to deal with mental health issues, but also our rural areas. And so we've done a great job at that, those crisis centers. Now we're talking about opening up 2 more new crisis centers, one in Tuscaloosa and other areas. So I think that we're doing well there. We put in more funding into our crisis center, into mental health. And so that has opened up. When you start getting people staying at home during this pandemic, and those people are going through these withdrawals, I would say, being at home, we start seeing alcoholism go up. We start seeing abuse go up in this state. And so some of that could be attributed to this pandemic, but at the end of the day, for whatever is contributed to, we're making sure that we address it. And so I think we're doing the proper thing by addressing it and putting the money where our mouths are to make sure that the people of the state of Alabama are safe.
You mentioned prisons. It was last week when the prison bond sale. This
yes.
is, the legislature, y'all passed this prison construction plan. It's pretty ambitious. New prisons, I think 4,000 inmates apiece, these first 2.
Mm-hmm.
The bond sale fell short of expectations, though. And at the meeting the other day, y'all were talking about how, well, yeah, maybe you wanted more money, but you said it was enough to at least get started.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, we sold about 70% of the bonds, or maybe a little bit more of that. We went in at, about $700 million. We sold about $500 million of those bonds. And it's not that we couldn't sell them. It's just the fact that where the market is now in terms of inflation, the bond series that was up for sale that we didn't sell was the more long-term, more 30-year kind of series of bonds. And so we was able to sell more of the short-term series and get $500 million of that. So we feel real good where we are. We understood that there was a volatile kind of market that we were going in, and it was hopefully that we could have gotten them all done. But at the end of the day, we feel good with where we are.
There's a lot of critics of this prison construction plan. There were the same critics of the governor's contract plan, really kind of any plan, mainly from the left, arguing that, that we incarcerate too many people.
Right.
And that, eventually arguing that maybe we ought to incarcerate fewer and maybe let some folks out. But their argument is also that, look, building prisons alone can't solve the problem that we have in prisons in terms of danger, the health problems, the mental health problems, things like that. How do you respond to those critics who are pretty aggressive in their arguments?
Well, look, I respect their arguments, and because of the way that our prisons are now, I have those people on that side saying that we need to get these people out of these deplorable situations. So that's what we're addressing. So we address that. So with that, we solve a lot of those problems that people are saying. When you look at it right now, some of the danger points in when you talk to the prison commission, right now there are hidden areas where there are no cameras and things of that nature where that violence are taking places. Right now, we don't have individual cells in a lot of our facilities, and the new facilities will have individual cells so we can do segregation and lock people down. We're looking at, as the Supreme Court talked about this week in their report back to us, the specialty courts. We're looking at drug courts, mental health courts, all these kind of courts that will keep people from going to prison. We're not trying to lock up people who normally that we've thrown in prison for having mental health issues. We're not trying to keep them out. We're having specialty courts. So usually now the more people that we're putting in prison now are our A felons, the people who are really dangerous that are going to prison now. Because in 2015, we did a reform that gave us a D-class felony that let a lot of people out. And so we were able to keep a lot of people from going to prison now. So I think a lot of that is going on. We're having to build up our specialty courts in our areas. They're not in all the areas that you saw earlier this week with the Supreme Court, the way they supported, express where those courts are. We need to add more courts, more judges. And those are the kind of things that we'll be able to help put people back into community correction programs, bring about our community correction program, uplift those community correction programs, put more funding in those community correction programs to where people don't have to go to prison. And so with that, building these prisons is going to help us be able to stop some of the violence. We won't be able to stop it all, but some of those things that we have, those critics are talking about, we think addressing. Right now, if you go to some of our prisons, there's raw sewage that are running on the floor there. Deplorable situations that no one want their loved ones in it, because they're still human beings. The humanity of a man is still there, and so we just want to be able to take care of those inmates, do them right because they're still human. Just because they committed a crime, we think that people can be rehabilitated, and that's what the road that we need to go down, to rehabilitating those people, to bring them back into society.
Well, speaking of that, I know that the Perry County facility is supposed to play a big part in that. Where are we in I think I saw a ribbon cutting, but is it open? Is it ready to go?
Well, they are getting it prepared to be ready. We did a soft opening in terms of being able to. They are ramping up staff right now. They're bringing in. You got Trentham. Who's going to go in there and build a campus on there. They're about to start construction on that new campus there for those trades.
So this is, just to make sure our viewers understand, this is a kind of a multi-use facility where pardons and paroles is also going to be working with the two-year colleges and the correction system, kind of for a re-entry.
Yes, right? Total re-entry. And when you look at these young men and women who go through our prison system, through our Trentham State and through our prison education programs, we offer welding, brick masonry, and we give a certification. And so when they walk out, a lot of times they just don't know what to do with it, don't know where to go. And so what this program would do is term PREP, prison reentry education program. And so what we're doing is making sure that when they come out, there's a program to where they can come in, learn how to get a license to be that licensed plumber that they want to be, or the licensed welder. Help them set up their corporation if they want to go on their own, or help them find a job. Teaching them soft skills, how to interview and go do a job, helping them get a suit or work clothes or a pair of boots or whatever it is to go out and get that job. We think that this is what's going to be a game changer in being able to stop the recidivism and keeping those revolving doors from revolving here in the state of Alabama.
That's really interesting. Some of the intangibles that maybe you don't always think about.
Yes.
Well, look, switching gears real quick, we're here in the State House, and there's always been talk of a special session in terms of ARPA 2. Y'all spent the first half of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. There's a second half coming. Maybe it's here, but we're waiting on the rules. Do you expect there to be a special session, or do you expect the legislature to take it up in the regular next spring?
I think with the extension that the federal government gave us on ARPA, we can have that leverage to go back into the spring. I don't know whether there's a real need. And, I think it's good for us to be able to get the rules down packed, know what we can spend this money on. Not only do we just have ARPA, but we have the highway construction money coming in, all of those other dollars that there that give us an opportunity to sit back, look at what we can spend this money on, and be able to distribute it to where it's best could be needed. Unless there is a big outbreak, of the pandemic here in the state again. The numbers are rising again now. Unless we see that, then we will have cause to come in early and spend that money. But if we don't have that happening here in the state, I think that we can sit back, look at it, and we can do it back in the spring when we come back in.
And it may be too early to ask you this question, but the first half of the ARPA, a lot of it was water and sewer, really addressing a need there. Broadband, a lot of rural broadband needs. Those were the two biggest. Of course, healthcare, hospitals, things like that. Is it too early to say, or what do you think the second half of ARPA, will it be the same kind of focus, or will there be different priorities?
Well, we haven't sit down as a committee to look at that. I think that what you're going to have are some of the same things going to happen again, because there is a need for more money for broadband. There may be a need, a second half, for some of the larger cities to be able to get some of the water and wastewater services that they didn't get. Hospitals are always going to be there, especially if there's a spike. We're going to have to look at hospitals and nursing homes. So those things are going to be there. So there may be some repeats. So there are going to be some of those extra things added, like housing. You're looking at rental assistance over the Alabama Housing financing that they got $200 and some odd million there that still has to be spent. So there is some dollars that are going to be added to that, but you will probably some of the same repeat numbers going out there.
You represent a largely rural district.
Yes.
Were you pretty pleased with the fact that the first ARPA, so much of it was spent on rural projects, water and sewer, rural broadband? Of course, I mean, you lobbied pretty heavily for that, right?
For the first time, we were first. Okay.
Okay.
For the first time, we were first. It really felt good that the governor and the rest of the committee, was willing to say, hey, we have these problems in the state. It's hitting rural areas harder than what it is with those of us in urban areas. And they were willing to go down that line with us. And so I really applaud my friends from across the aisle, the governor's office, in making sure that rural communities were looked after in this first ARPA fund, because that's what the greater need was at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. We're in an election season, and so that means you'll come back whenever you come back. I guess there will be an organizational, but next year will be a brand new term. There'll be a different legislature, a lot of new faces.
Yes.
Including in your caucus. How do you, from a leadership standpoint, address? How do you work with, getting folks accustomed to the Senate and the legislature in general?
Well, what we're doing in the Senate caucus, we're going to be meeting with all those people who were elected, giving them our own specific orientation, introducing them to the process to make sure they understand it, and just being able to be a resource to younger members who are coming in or people who are coming in for the first time, making sure they understand the process and how they can be a help to us and on the minority side with the process, and understanding how we work really well together across the aisle in a bipartisan manner, and that we're just not here just to come in and just bash anyone, to make sure that we're just bashing the system. But, because when you're new, you come in with all these high expectations, you're going to change the world, and it's about the reality. And let's just let it sit in and say, hey, this is the reality. Some of these things that you may have run on that you said you're going to get done, they may not happen in your first year. So you need to understand that there's a process. And so that's what we want to do, is give that kind of orientation to our new people and let them understand that we're a team, that we work together.
Yeah, because I could see somebody running for office and they're seeing Washington, right?
Yes.
And what do you do up there? It's
a
all
clash.
right. But I will say, especially in the Senate, y'all do have a way of really working together and get your business done a lot behind the scenes. How has that worked for you? Do you expect that to work going forward?
Yes, I do. I mean, with Leader Reed being at the helm, and Schofield being the majority leader, we meet often and we talk about the process and how we're going to move forward in the process. We don't always agree on everything, but those things that we can do what's best for the state of Alabama in a bipartisan manner, we do them well together. And those things that we know we're going to fight on, we just go at it. And that's the process. And I think that that's the way it is. We put Alabama first. We put not our own individual self, our own individual parties. And there are going to be some things that are party issues that happens. And that's just the reality here in the process. But when it does happen, we know when it's going to happen and we deal with it accordingly.
Well, yeah, I was talking with Marika Coleman, who she's really eager to come upstairs. Also in Senate District 23.
Yes.
This is where Hank Sanders has represented that for a long time. His daughter, Malika, represented that for a while, for the last 4 years. And now there's a new person.
Yes.
New nominee, still has to have a general election. Robert Stewart.
Yes.
I've not met him, but this is a pretty big deal in terms of, somebody new in Senate District 23.
Yes, Robert is a great guy. He's young, intelligent, super personality, great to work with. I was proud to be able to support Robert. A lot of people talk about giving back. I wanted to give forward, and that was no mark against the senator entering the race again. And I talked with him about that. And it's all about looking at the future. I'm 60 years old. I want to be able to give forward. We, as a minority, has to have a voice in this Senate, and I want to make sure that that we have a voice for the future. And I think Robert is eager to learn. I think he want to be on the scene. He's been involved in the process. He's worked with Congresswoman Sewell as a field representative for her. and he understands the political process. I think he'll come in here, he'll be able to jump in, learn the rules, be able to come in and be an asset to us. He has a voice, he don't mind speaking out. And so I'm eager to work with him and to be able to lend that forward. Whatever it is that I could do to help him, I'm willing to do. Just as I did with Senator Fortier when she first came on. She and I met often. I was willing to lend to her. Every time she wanted to meet, I gave her my undivided attention on anything that she wanted to do, or any other new member. When Senator Coleman gets here, the House rules and the Senate rules are a little different. Once she get here, if there's something as a leader that I could do to make it better for her, I would do the same thing for her. Always want to lend forward.
Well, I mean, you were once the new guy, right?
I was the new
when did
guy.
you first come in?
And I came in the House in 2002, and there was a special election in 2004, and I actually sat in the Senate in 2005 after the general election came in January 2005. And so people gave me an opportunity, and there was an opportunity for me to learn, an opportunity for me to get indoctrinated, and here I am today, the Senate Minority Leader. So I think that is something that I want to see these young minds and these young brilliant minds come along and to be able to do. And there are others who are out there running for the Senate seats across the state that I'm hopefully that we will be successful in join and add more people to our fold, to get my numbers up.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're out of time, but thank you, Senator, for coming on Capitol Journal.
I really appreciate you. Thanks, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Next, I'm joined by John Wahl, chairman of the Alabama Republican Party. Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Oh, no, it's always a pleasure to be on Capitol Journal. Always enjoy interviewing with you guys.
Well, it's the end of a very busy election season, maybe busier than maybe you predicted. But I wanted to ask you, before we get into more specifics, just in general, are you pleased with how the elections, were administered and took place, and now that it's all over?
I think there were a lot of positives. We also learned a lot this cycle. So I won't say that everything was perfect, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But I think any election cycle for me is a positive. If the people get to present their voice, go to the polls and vote, that's what the election is about. And we had that happen. And I won't lie, I'm always concerned about turnout being lower than I want it to be. I'm a perfectionist. I always think things can be better. I think that's what drives me as the party chairman to push for things to be more successful. And in the same vein, I would love to see higher turnout. I think that was probably what disappointed me most this cycle.
Well, you mentioned some of the issues that were, present in the primary this time around. Some of that had to do with the ballots being wrong, right? You had that situation in Etowah County where, because of the new districts that were drawn late last year, weren't necessarily reflected in all of the ballots. I think you had the same issue up in Lauderdale County. There were a handful of counties where this happened. Have you had conversations with Secretary Merrill and with local registrars about what happened and how to fix this in the future?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this was a very frustrating process for the Republican Party because in state law, in a primary, we're tasked with hearing these election contests, and really having to dig into the problems that were created by government, whether it was local government or state government or wherever at. So it's a process that really highlighted these mistakes for the party. And yeah, we had election contests, 3 that we've already heard, 1 that was filed yesterday. When we've looked into those 4 districts, all 4 of them have potential mistakes with redistricting boundaries and people given the wrong ballots. And that's incredibly concerning. I think for me, moving out of this is one of the main priorities of the party. We are going to look into that. We're going to work with, whether it's the Secretary of State, the Board of Registers, the legislature. We need to make sure that our Board of Registers all have voter mapping software. They all can double check, make sure people are in the right districts and are getting the right ballots. Because it's an absolute tragedy if people are receiving the wrong ballots.
Well, let's talk about Senate District 27. It really captivated the Alabama political world for a couple of weeks with, You had the incumbent Senator Tom Whatley defeated on election day by one vote by challenger Jay Hovey. Then challenges were filed. There was talk of a recount. That didn't happen. And then the surprising decision from I guess it was the steering committee or the party committee. I'm hoping that you can clarify a lot of this. Declared the race a tie by finding that one vote and then reversed that decision. We've covered that a lot here on Capitol Journal, and it's been in the news. But can you just kind of walk me through what happened internally there at the party with y'all's decision making?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first, it was the Alabama Republican Party's candidate committee, which is made up of the same members as the state steering committee for the party. And like I said, one of these situations where we're tasked by state law to hold hearings and look into these issues. And that day, June 25th, we literally sat through about 12 hours of depositions of hearing lawyers present their cases for both sides. I think a lot of people don't realize the party in this situation was not the party going out and looking for information. We were the judge. We had people, both sides presenting us information, and we worked with them. We helped them get the information they needed to be able to present their case. We listened to both sides. And at the end of the day, on June 25th, the information we had for that single vote that the committee allowed, we went back to there was reasonable doubt whether she was or was not registered to vote. It was clear that she attempted to register to vote. It was clear that somewhere in the process that chain of custody with her attempt at register fell through. We didn't know where that was. We didn't know if she was registered to vote somewhere in the system, but it didn't make it to the polling booth that day. So with that reasonable doubt, we felt it important to respect her vote as we would any person in Alabama. We talk a lot the Republican Party talks a lot about voter integrity and talks a lot about keeping our elections secure. The reason that's so important to make sure we don't have illegal votes is because we're protecting the legal ones. And I think that's incredibly important to remember through this process. When we had reasonable doubt that her vote may have been properly registered, we were not going to just let her vote get thrown out. We were going to make sure we knew what happened and not just sweep this under the rug, but investigate it. So that was the party's decision. We were going until we knew we were going to count her vote. And then that led to all other kinds of drama with, deciding after that. General election statute says that a tie would be concluded by a game of chance or a flip of a coin, drawing a heart, some type of chance to decide. The party steering committee, they felt like both these candidates were Republican. Both of them were qualified to be our nominees for state senate. And so they didn't want the party to pick between them. They wanted to be something neutral out of respect for both candidates. So that's kind of where that came from, where that led to. Now, I won't lie, as chairman under state law in a primary, I would have been the deciding voice. I don't think anybody in leadership ever likes having authority taken away from them, but I also respect the committee's decision and thought they acted in a way that they were hopeful was respectful to both candidates.
So it seemed to really turn when Aaliyah came out with its statement, because the committee meets on Saturday, right? And then on, I guess, Saturday night or Sunday morning, Aaliyah comes out with its statement saying, hey, we didn't process this. This woman, she was not registered to vote. She did not complete the form or whatever. That really seemed to change the game. And I mean, to the point where the committee reheard the decision or reconsidered the decision and went and said, no, we're going to throw out this vote. So walk me through that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, first thing is the party does care about election security. I mean, that is our fundamental basis. And when you look at Aaliyah's statement, and don't get me wrong, I wish they would have sent that out Friday before the hearing, and not Sunday after the hearing. But no,
well, in that same vein, I mean, did you approach Aaliyah? Why not go and ask Aaliyah for specifics if there's a question as to this person's registration status?
Right. Well, you have to remember, like I said before, the party was operating as a judge here. We were letting both sides collect information to present to us. We felt like if we got involved with that we could show favoritism towards one side or the other. And we felt like it was incumbent upon the party to stay neutral to be respectful of both sides, allow them to collect the information that then their lawyers presented to us, just as we would in a court of law. We're operating under state statute as a court in this situation. So I felt like it would have been inappropriate for the party to go collecting information. That was up to the attorneys for both sides. And that's actually what ended up happening. Hovey's attorneys filed a motion to rehear based on new information. We then, allowed Whatley's team the chance to send its information arguing for or against that, and then ultimately reheard based on new evidence. That's how the legal system works. And I think that's important to remember through this process. Some people didn't like the speed, and I won't lie. By nature, I like to resolve things quickly. But I think it's important that people understand that we followed the legal process. We did take it slow. We did investigate it. We looked into everything. And really, at the end, I think we made the right decision. Because if someone is not registered to vote, their vote cannot be counted. There's a line in the sand there that state law is clear about. The Republican Party supports election integrity. We weren't going to go there. But we do believe it's incredibly important that these issues are not swept under the rug. That they're not just ignored, that we take the time to really investigate them, learn what happened so we can stop it from happening again. And I believe in this situation, it's clear that ALEA needs to provide better information to people registering to vote. If they're not, once they say yes and they check that mark and they think they're registered, ALEA needs to let them know that they're not going to send that in until they complete the in this case, driver's license document.
Switching gears just a bit, but on a related note, there's talk about closed primaries. You heard it from you've talked about it a little bit on talk radio, heard it from others, especially because of the election results, right? You had some of the more mainstream candidates win rather than the further right candidates. And so you heard some frustration from some saying, well, maybe Democrats played in the race some, or people that aren't necessarily Republican, independents. So there's talk of closing the Republican primary, closing all party primaries to only those who are registered as a Republican or registered as a Democrat. You've advocated a little bit for this. Give me your pitch on why this would be a good idea.
Well, I think it's clear. This election cycle not only highlighted some of our problems with redistricting and with some of our processes, it also highlighted the fact that Democrats are purposely using the Republican primary to influence the elections of the Republican Party. And that's incredibly concerning for the party. It's incredibly concerning for any Republican voter out there. And I think it really shows the need for this right now. We literally had a open, hardcore Democrat write an op-ed for the New York Times explaining how they purposely voted in the Republican primary in an attempt to swing our elections. I don't know anyone who thinks that's a good idea or a good thing. Republicans shouldn't be voting in Democrat primaries, and Democrats shouldn't be voting in Republican primaries. That's just the way the party system works.
Yeah, let me push back on you though. So the way it works now is that it's open in terms of you decide the party you are on election day, right? On primary day, you choose that ballot. You say, okay, I'm going to vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary. Who is to say until that moment, until that day, that somebody chose to be a Republican or chose to be a Democrat? And where's the measuring stick? There are plenty of Republican candidates, Republican office holders that used to be Democrats, right? We've had a fluid system for years in the state, including back in the 80s and before, where all the Republicans voted in the Democratic primaries because that's the one that mattered. So who's to say, who's to judge when you switch parties or become a Republican or a Democrat? Who holds that measuring stick or that time measure?
Well, I think in this case, the Democrats have communicated that for us. Read that op-ed in the New York Times. She didn't say, I decided that I was going to be Republican. She said, I, as a Democrat, stayed a Democrat and purposely went and voted in the Republican primary.
I understand that, but that's one case. So you want to prevent that, but how if you go to a complete closed primary, how do you also prevent others who, hey, I just decided I'm gonna vote Republican today, I would assume that you want more people to decide to become Republicans. It's to grow the party or what have you. So how do you prevent what you don't want, but also avoid going too far and stopping other people from deciding to become Republicans? My question is, do you deter people from actually becoming Republicans?
Yeah, no, excellent question. And I don't think you do. And let me explain why. One, I expect in Alabama the large majority of people when they register as Republican. We're a supermajority state. They're going to know whether they're Republicans or Democrats. Now, as those people who, like you said, may see the error of supporting Democrats, which I think we probably are seeing droves right now with the policies coming out of the Biden administration and the lack of respect for people's rights and freedoms coming from the Biden administration and the flawed policies on fiscal policies. So I understand, we want those people who are disenfranchised by frankly, the terrible policies of the Democrat Party. We want them in the Republican Party. We welcome them. But you have to remember, with a closed primary system, you can switch your registration. Nothing prevents you from changing from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party. It just is not as easy, and you can't just do it flippantly and then switch back instantly. And I think that's the key. We want people who are sincere. We want people who take the time to say, hey, you know what? I'm a Republican. I'm going to go down and I'm going to switch my registration status. Mm-hmm. Not ones who just walk into the poll booth and like, hey, I'm going to play in the Republican primary today because I'm a Democrat and I want to have influence on them.
The other thing I've heard is, from critics of this idea is that, okay, if it's a closed primary, only those who I'm going to register as a Republican and that's the only way I get to vote in the Republican primary, then you do miss out on a lot of independents, maybe more moderating forces. So you only get the far right candidates. In essence, you get a bunch of Roy Moores who, maybe not at the beginning, but, eventually might threaten the Republicans, as you put, dominance in elections here. Is that a concern that you only get the far right?
Well, I think there are two things to look at there. We elected Roy Moore with our current system. That's an argument that it does not fly. Two, and I think this is incredibly important for anyone within the party. And let's make this clear. I trust the Republican primary voters. It's not my call to manipulate them or tell them, hey, I don't trust you enough, so we're going to do this because this might provide us with candidates I like better. That's not my call. I trust Republican primary voters. I think the party has to, and I think it's disrespectful to them for anyone to use that argument. Republicans should be electing Republican nominees. And if you're saying we should allow Democrats and independents to vote in our primaries so we get moderate candidates, quite frankly, I find that disrespectful to Republican primary voters.
Well, we'll be watching that going forward. Mr. Chairman, hopefully the busyness is over for the most part. The drama is over for the most part. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on Capitol Journal.
Oh, no, always a pleasure to be here. And thank you for all you do.
Thanks. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Next, I'm pleased to be joined by Tiffany Davis, a rising senior at Clay Chalkville High School, and PBS Newshour's Gwen Ifill Fellow. That's a part of the Student Reporting Labs. Tiffany, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Thanks for having me here.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about this special fellowship, the Student Reporting Labs, and what got you involved in this program?
Well, this internship has been amazing so far. I have been able to produce and work with Miss Heather and learn about different cameras. I've learned about how to produce my own video, edit my own video, and work with other people and getting to interview them. And I found out about this by my school's broadcast program. Mm-hmm. And my teacher, Miss Gillette, I don't know where she found out this program, but she told me to sign up and I got the position. So
now we've got to note that the Gwen Ifill Fellowship, this is only 3 people in the United States that get this honor, and you are one of them. And Alabama is honored that you're one of us. Yes. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I'm very blessed to have been able to get this position because it's only 3 people in the whole nation.
Right. Now, you mentioned your high school broadcast program. So you've worked with your your school's television station and their news program. Has that been a big part of what got you interested in news and video?
Yes, sir. I started the program in 10th grade from watching, because in classes, each Friday they upload a weekly episode, and then they upload daily episodes that introduces like the lunchroom schedules and what we're going to eat that day and what is there to look forward to. And so I first got introduced to the broadcast program in 9th grade, and then in 10th grade I auditioned and I got into the program, and we learned how to edit our videos, and now I'm an anchor for the broadcast.
Now I know that as a part of this fellowship, you produce your own video that's going to be, showcased here on APT and on PBS Newshour. What have you chosen as your subject?
My subject, I am going to talk about art and how it underrepresents people of color. And I have chose to interview a Black artist. His name is Willie Williams Jr., and his studio is Studio 2500. It is in North Alabama, and with this studio he promotes diversity, and I'm going to pretty much just talk about art and how it can represent people and bring communities together, because he is very engaged in the community and with different art shows to like art paint days. So I'm going to talk about how art can bring the community together and represent people of color.
That's really interesting. Is there a timeline that we know this video will be completed?
Well, I go back to school in August, so I'm going to have my video completed by the time I go to school.
Yeah.
Prayfully.
Well, we all learn about deadlines, you know. So, well, look, it's time for you to ask me questions. You've got the Gwen Ifill name attached to your fellowship, so and you're the anchor. So, do you have any questions for me?
Yes, I have a few questions. How did you get into broadcast journalism?
Well, it's fairly recently. I worked in politics for 15 years, and then about 5 years got out of politics and started a news organization called the Alabama Daily News to report on things from a fair and balanced perspective, not leaning right, not leaning left, but right down the middle. And then in December, as Don Daly was retiring as host of Capitol Journal, APT approached me about filling his shoes, and we've been doing it ever since. My first show was in January, and I've been host ever since.
Nice. So tell me about your favorite part about journalism.
My favorite part about journalism, both in print and broadcast, I'd say, is being able to reveal important information, bring important information to readers, to viewers, ultimately just to citizens, about their government or about their leaders that they need to know, because it's important for the function of our society, for people who are citizens, people who are voters, to understand clearly what their leaders are doing, what their government is doing, and from a standpoint of fairness and balance, and not trying to preach or lean hard, tip the scales toward one side or the other.
So you just talked about balance. How can journalism connect with the younger generations coming up?
Well, that's a real challenge. I mean, you think about social media. You think about, when I was first getting started in my career, Facebook was pretty new, Twitter was pretty new, Instagram wasn't even around yet. And now it's more about, Instagram, TikTok, all these kind of things. So how do you utilize that? How do you communicate to folks really in your generation? I think it's going to be a challenge, but I think a big part of that is utilizing and involving people like yourself and your peers to not just do it the old way, like we maybe know how to do it, but to bring your experience and talents and expertise on these other platforms and say, well, we know how to communicate to our generation. Let us show you. I think listening and involving folks like yourself is going to be critical for places like this and all around the media to be successful.
Okay. And my last question I have is, what is your take in your role and what's going on today?
Oof. Well, I mean, there's a lot going on. There's just a lot going on in our world. There's a lot going on in our country. It's really volatile politically. I'm assuming that's kind of what you mean with just sort of the political volatility. It's challenging because people are mad. People are angry on every ideological spectrum. They're mad, and these days, a lot of them have been conditioned to want news and to consume news that only agrees with them. And I reject that. I think that's unhealthy for a society. I think that creates just sort of a feedback loop, an echo chamber that only makes people more mad and more, irritated and everything about their government. So I think there's never been more important time to be fair, to be thorough, to offer informative news to the public. We try to do that every week and every night here on Alabama Public Television. And we're going to continue doing it, and hopefully that's our role in all this craziness.
All right.
Hey, that was a good job. I mean, look, you're who knows, a budding Gwen Ifill in the making. And but again, congratulations. We're honored to have you on Capitol Journal, and we're honored to have you as part of Alabama Public Television. Good luck in the future.
Thank you. And you too.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be right back here next Friday night at 7:30 on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.